Hey guys, it's Solbyte, and today we're going to be going over inheritance. Inheritance is a very important and big topic in object-oriented programming. As you continue your programming career and the more that you use classes, you will undeniably use inheritance during your future projects. So what exactly is inheritance? What is it exactly referring to when it comes to object-oriented programming? So in object-oriented programming, there are basically two types of classes. There is the base class. You could think of this as like the master class or like the parent class. And then we have derived classes. Derived classes you can think of like child classes. They derive from the base class, the parent class. So basically we can use this in a way that, so for instance, let's say we're building a website or some kind of application and, we've created the class user. Well, for certain projects, users, I mean, there can be a multitude of different types of users, right? I mean, there can be free users, people that are using the application or website for free. There can be paid users. They can be admin users, moderators, all different types of users, just totally depending on what kind of project that you're making. And so we would, let's say we want all of these methods and members to be inherited into those specific types of users. So let's go ahead and get started with our example so that way I can kind of show you. We're going to create a paid user derived class. So we're going to create a child class from this much larger parent class. So let's go ahead and do class paid user. And the way that we inherit from the base class is we add this colon and then we add the base class. So this, for the syntax, is basically saying that we are creating this new specific class and we want to inherit the methods and members of user. So let's go ahead and start creating some new things for our derived class. So let's go ahead and do public. And if you don't know what public is or private, please go back to my first video in this series. We're going to really be using a lot of access modifiers today, and if you don't, if you're not already somewhat familiar with access modifiers, this tutorial might be, you might be a little lost. So please go back and look at those, or go back and look at that video if you haven't already. So let's go ahead and create, or let's do a private access modifier as well, and let's just add a new member. So let's see, paid member, what do we want to keep track of? Well, I think in my next video, I'm going to create a function that allows maybe a paid user to, I don't know, maybe gain money or, I don't know, gain some other kind of feature depending on how long they've been a paid user for. So let's say we want to keep track of how long the user has been a paid member. So let's just make a integer variable called paid history. So this will be a variable, and let's say we'll make this in weeks. So 1, if this variable has the value 1, then that means 1 week. They've been a paid member for 1 week, or if it's been 2, then 2 weeks, etc. So, and now let's go ahead and create a function, or sorry, a method. In classes, it's called a method that will print the paid history of our paid user. So let's just do cout, and let's get the name of our user here, and then we'll do has been a paid user for, let's do paid history to show the amount of weeks, and then let's go ahead and specify that it is in weeks. All right, perfect. All right, so we have our function here, and now, oh, don't forget the semicolon here for classes. I sometimes forget myself. So that's why we were seeing that red line there. But anyways, let's go ahead and continue. So yeah, we now have the paid history method that will allow us to see how long a user has been a paid user for. So now let's just go ahead and try to use this. So we'll make this user one a paid user. So now this is a paid user object, which derives features from the base class user. And let's go ahead and just do user one paid history. And we will just print that here in the terminal really quick. So go ahead and compile, and this should work just fine, right? So NA has been a paid user for a lot of weeks. Oh my goodness, what number even is that? It's something in the billions, I think. I don't know. But anyways, yeah, clearly this is not a good thing. And if you remember in our constructors video, we went over why something like this would happen, and it's due to the default constructor that the compiler gives a class that does not already have a defined constructor defined inside of it. And you might notice the NA that is down here, and clearly that's actually correct, because up here in the base class, we used the default constructor, we defined the default constructor to give it the name NA and the age -1. And that is because it is still able to use the default constructor derived from user. However, because paid history is an entirely new variable, totally specific to our paid user class, it doesn't really know what to do with it, so it just gives it a default value. So it's good, or it definitely would be needed here for us to create a constructor for this derived class. So let's go ahead and do that really quick, so that way we can avoid any issues like this. So we'll go ahead and create the constructor. And if you haven't seen my constructors video, please go and check that out before as well, because we're going to go a little bit more into detail about what constructors can do in this video. So now we're going to set it up kind of in a very similar way. So up here, let's see, we passed in string name and int age. So let's go ahead and just kind of do the same thing here. String name and age, and now we'll have another one, an integer variable for weeks. So perfect. Now recall that we already have this constructor up here that tells the program how to build the object based on these two variables. So we can actually reuse this down here. So the way that we can do it, the syntax needed for it is we add a colon there, and we can just use the constructor from the base class, and then use name and use age. So now this will assign the name and the age for the paid user object in the same way that it would for this constructor up here in the base class. So that's awesome. That makes things a lot easier for us. So, and now we just need to go ahead and define the weeks and where that needs to be stored. So let's do paid history instead of equal to weeks. So perfect. Now we have created a constructor that allows us to avoid any issues with, memory overflow or anything like that. However, if you do see down here, it now says that there is no default constructor for paid user. And that's because if you remember from my constructors video, I said that whenever you create a constructor for a class, the compiler no longer uses a default constructor. So now this is treated as the constructor that it will use by default. And down here, we're not using it. And if we wanted to use it, we can do paid user. And let's go ahead and add some values. So we'll do Solbyte, do 22 as the age, and let's do 2 weeks. The paid user has been a paid user for 2 weeks. So let's go ahead and run this just to make sure that it works properly. So go ahead and compile that, and it should work just fine. Yep. So Solbyte has been a paid user for 2 weeks. It's perfect. So clearly this is constructing this object just how it needs to. But once again, default constructors sometimes will be needed. Sometimes it's actually very good to create the object and then fill in the values later. So what we can do is we need to create a default constructor the same way that we did up here, right? We created a normal kind of constructor that allows us to fill in the name and the age. Then we also created one that would allow us just to use, just to create the object without defining any values yet for it. So let's go ahead and do the same thing here. And it'll be very similar syntax. So we'll just do paid user and we'll just do that. And then we'll add a colon and do user. This way we can also use the default constructor up here. So that's kind of what we're using for this right here. So that way it, assigns the same value. So therefore, if we do this, then user1 will be, will have the name NA and the age -1, the same way that it would if it was just using the base class user. So let's go ahead and we still, however, do need to define the paid history, of course. And since it is, a brand new user without, any sort of history, let's just go ahead and assign paid history to 0. So now, as we can see, the red line has disappeared, and let's go ahead and just try to run it just to make sure that it does indeed work for us. And it does. So NA has been a paid user for 0 weeks. Let me go ahead and make some comments here. It's always a good idea to organize your code, especially as it gets much larger, as ours is right now. So we'll go ahead and just kind of add a little bit of comments here and there. So perfect. So we were successfully able to create a paid user and, derive a lot of functionality from the base class. But now I want to bring up two very important points that kind of dive into the accessibility of these derived classes and some errors that you can run into if you're not careful. So let's say instead of, showing the paid history, let's just say we want to get the name. Let's just get the name of user1 instead. And as you can see, we get a red line here. And that's because it says that get name is inaccessible. Why is that? Well, so just like we actually had to, of course, we have to kind of define what methods and what members are public in a class, we have to do the same thing for when we derive those members and methods from a base class. So we need to actually specify that we are getting the public members and methods of user. So we need to type in public. All right, perfect. And now if we scroll down, we can see that the red line has disappeared, and I'll run it one more time as well, just so that way we can see that it does. Oh, never mind. It doesn't do that. Why does it not do that? Oh yeah, no, I'm sorry. I'm slightly dumb. Okay, I'll do that. I'll do this now. Okay, this, I forgot this of course returns the string. It doesn't print the string. So sorry about that, little hiccup there. But yeah, anyways, now we can use the getName method from the base class in our paid user derived class. So another area that we see getName pop up is right here in paid history. So what happens if instead I want to just use name, right? I just try to access the name. Well, obviously it's inaccessible, and that is because we made these members private, right? So these are hidden. These literally cannot be used by anything outside of this class here, right? But, what if we want our derived classes that inherit from this base class to still be able to have access to their name and their age, and still be able to use those and modify those? So in my intro to classes video, I actually brought up that there are 3 different access modifiers. There's private, public, and protected. Now, if we want our child classes, our derived classes, to be able to have access to these members, that it's inheriting from the base class, we can put these members under the protected access modifier. So I'm going to go ahead and do that really quick. And as we scroll down, we can see that now name is totally accessible in the paid user class. And a good way to kind of remember it is that the parent always protects the child. So these members are hidden except for its derived classes. So that's why protected is kind of like a middle ground for some instances. So yeah, now if you ever do want these members that you want to be hidden throughout the rest of your code, because I mean, if we go here, we can still see that name isn't accessible, right? But if we want to use or modify those members in the derived class, we can do that by making those members protected in the base class. So yeah, hopefully everything is making sense so far. Inheritance is one of those things that you kind of have to, get your hands dirty and just kind of begin testing it and experimenting it with your own ideas, and just get some practice with it. When I first learned about inheritance, I was slightly confused at first, but over time you really kind of start to grasp it a lot easier. So and there's more detailed things that we could go into for this kind of stuff. Like for instance, a more acceptable way of initializing this paid history value is by doing paid history 0. And this essentially initializes paid history to 0. Same exact functionality that we just did, but this is usually a lot better for the future, because a lot of the times we may not be initializing an integer variable. We may be initializing, like an object or, something much more complex. So just many different things that we could really get into. But for the sake of simplicity and just kind of getting the idea across, it's good to just kind of play around with this and try to understand what it's doing. And yeah, just keep practicing, and eventually it'll click just fine. And if not already, which if it does already click, then perfect. You are in a more advanced field for object-oriented programming. So perfect. So yeah, if anyone has any questions, please let me know in the comments below. And in the next video, I will go over abstraction. And after that, we will go into the entirety of polymorphism. So definitely make sure to watch the abstraction video if you intend to understand the polymorphism side of object-oriented programming, because it is a very important topic and it kind of derives from inheritance and abstraction. So yeah, anyways, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys later.